I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV, Velocities in Music, the best kept secret in music reviews. Today, throwbacks, extravaganza, requests. This is what we do. Oasis. Third album, second album? Second album, you said.
Yes.
Oasis. What's the story? Morning Glory. Tom loves this band. Tom loves this band.
He does.
And I think that over time, I've heard all of Oasis's discography at some point or another over being friends with this dude for half my life now. And
sad.
it is, isn't it? It's just depressing, really. We've been doing this for way too long. What's the story? Morning Glory is arguably Oasis's best work. I found this album to be more enjoyable the more I got into it, but before we really dig into what the sound is, Tom, why don't you give everyone some backdrop of what the historical importance is of this album, in the Britpop scene, and then also, your own experiences with it.
Yeah, well, the mid-90s, this came out in 95, that kind of stretch of like 93 to 97, kind of centering around this year, was really a huge time for British music. People call it the Britpop years, where you had bands like Oasis and Blur and Suede and the Stone Roses and the Smiths back in like the late 80s kind of influenced it, but basically British music once again kind of even leaked into mainstream American music.
Right,
but
which we were obsessed with grunge at the time.
Yeah, exactly. You had bands like Nirvana and Alice in Chains and Soundgarden and Pearl Jam going on, and a lot of, I remember watching that Blur documentary we watched, and Blur was talking about how they really didn't like that whole sound, and them kicking against that, and then bands like Oasis with albums like Definitely Maybe and What's the Story Morning Glory really helped to give British music something to kick against with that kind of more depressing American rock scene that was going on. So there was just this kind of battle between those bands, though. Famously, Blur and Oasis were feuding a lot. And this was kind of the showdown, was in 1995 when Oasis came out with What's the Story Morning Glory and Blur came out with The Great Escape. We could do a whole 20-minute video just talking about that whole shindig. But we'll kind of get back to the music here. That's just a little bit of the historical context and why there was so much hype around these bands at the time. Because I really feel like that historical moment was very important. Because if it had come out too much earlier or if it had come out too much later, it probably would have been overlooked to some degree. But just because this exact kind of British rock or pop music was what was in the focus, what was in the limelight in the music media at the time, that's why this got so much attention. And it was really interesting looking back because, Blur came out with their first album, Leisure, in 1991. They had Modern Life is Rubbish in 93, Park Life in 94, which is the same year Oasis came out with their first album. And then both of them came out with their albums in 1995, and it was a big showdown. So
he just spewed all that just straight from memory, no research, I will attest.
Okay, well, thank you. But what's the story? Morning Glory, as Jake said, arguably some of their best work, probably their best album, I would say, just from my as objective standpoint as I can get. I also do like Definitely Maybe. I do like Be Here Now, the albums that came before and after. But I feel like this is where they had as much diversity as you'll get from Oasis. Right. I mean, Definitely Maybe it was very good songwriting, but it was a very one-dimensional album. This one has a lot more low moments mixed in with the high moments. And just some of the most memorable vocal melodies you'll ever hear. And I think that's why this is still talked about today. So many years later, 18 years later, people are still talking about What's the Story Morning Glory. You're still hearing Wonderwall, Don't Look Back in Anger, and Champagne Supernova on the radio. And it's because they have just some of the most infectious melodies that I've ever heard.
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head. I think that when you look at, I think that you have to give credit to the guitars, the bass and guitars here, following, and Brit rock did this very well. But the bass and guitars are very good. There's a lot of very catchy guitar lines, very strong bass lines throughout this, but it's that coupled with Gallagher's extremely addictive vocal hooks that it just sells it. But not on every song.
No.
And the thing that gets me about this album that keeps me out of saying, yeah, this album's really awesome, deserves to be on a best of all time list, which I don't think it does. I think it's good. I just don't think it deserves to be on there. To me, I think that there's too many tracks on here that are just not up to par. Like there's just a few filler tracks, which was actually at the time that was pretty normal for bands to do that. I just feel like when you're looking at a total listening experience, you cannot get to those hiccups and have those hiccups in an album listen and expect to make it on to a top albums of all time list. Now, as far as Brit rock goes, obviously this is a monumental album.
Now, I'd be interested to know, what are those tracks for you? Because we actually said something kind of similar about Siamese Dream when we reviewed it, and we frequently have people saying, "Are you guys crazy? Filler on Siamese Dream?" So what are some songs to you that...
She's electric for sure.
That's definitely my least favorite track on the album.
Hey Now, I'm not that enamored with.
I like Hey Now all right. I'm not a huge fan of She's Electric, or Some Might Say, or Hey Now.
Yeah,
I just
Some
kinda
Might
like,
Say. I know it was a single, and I know that a lot of people really like that track. It's just not one of my favorites.
Yeah.
In all honesty, the trillion times that I've heard Wonderwall in my life,
Yeah.
I'm a little sick of that song, but it's still just damn good. You listen to that, it's just even though the vocal melodies are just maybe, just forever, just never stops saying the word maybe. Even though, I mean, it's still addictive, it's still catchy, and you still can't help but sing along. And Champagne Supernova is a great closer, and really a strong opener like Hello, and a strong closer like Champagne Supernova really put our bookends on, and that's what kind of saves it for me. It makes it worth it because we have that good starting track and that good end track. But the song Don't Look Back in Anger, probably one of my favorite British rock tracks of all time.
It's one of my favorite songs.
Yeah,
that one and Champagne Supernova. And that's, those really good moments are the saving graces for me on this album, because I do have some gripes. I love this album. I grew up with this, as I did a lot of British rock. But the thing that's always kept us back a little bit for me is, first off, some track displacement. As we said, there are a few tracks that I just feel like aren't quite up to par. Another thing is, it's just very repetitive between songs and also within songs. I mean, you'll feel like the song's ready to be over, and then they'll sing another verse that's the same as the first verse of the song, and that's what drags some of these songs out up into the upper 5-minute range. I don't think that's justified, because they're not going anywhere new with it. I don't feel like I'm getting any added quality or value by hearing that same damn verse again, and that bothers me a little bit.
This guy's knocking it out of the park tonight.
No.
That was awesome.
All right. Well, I'm glad that you agree with me on that, because that does hold it back for me a little bit, but still, I have to compliment them on the fact that while there are some filler stuff, there are some moments I don't like, they have this knack for making verses just as memorable as choruses. A lot of bands rely on choruses to be that memorable spot in the song where people are going to come back to. But here, I mean, I find some of these verses just as catchy as I do the choruses, if not more.
Heck yeah.
And they're still different enough that I find it engaging. It's just some of the repetition in other sections of the songs that I'm just like, I think that they're trying to get away with a bit too much at times. But I still love this album. That's my big gripe.
Favorite Oasis album?
Probably this one.
This one?
Definitely Maybe and Be Here Now are just below.
Maybe.
That sounds confusing, definitely. But after that, everything that they put out after Be Here Now, I wasn't overly impressed with. Like, I can listen to it and enjoy it okay, but it kind of just starts to all sound the same to me. As everyone knows, I'm a huge Blur fan, and I feel like I just get more diversity out of their discography, but the highlights of Oasis's discography, this being one of them, is very enjoyable.
Cool. What would you give it?
I'm going to give this a 91.
Okay.
I really like it.
Quite a bit lower than you, but I think that's just because I didn't grow up with it. I don't know, it's not part of my childhood. That always plays a role in some of these older albums. Like, it's okay to just love stuff, and there's nothing wrong. Just because an album may not be, like, critically the best thing you've ever heard doesn't mean you can't love it. I mean, if you have albums from your childhood that you still can't get enough of today, keep listening to them. I'm going 82. I don't have that with this album, but I still like it. I still think it's a
I honestly thought you were going to like it less than that. So I'm just happy you're in the 80s.
And honestly, I started probably somewhere in like the low 70s, and like as some of the tracks just kind of soaked into my brain, I was just
that's what it takes.
Yeah, and I started to enjoy the album more because of that, and it was just a couple handful of tracks really keeping this out of the mid to upper 80s for me. So overall, I did like it 82 for me, so mid 80s average, 87 average for us. What did you guys think about Oasis? What's your favorite Oasis album? Moreover, what is your favorite Brit rock album? I want to know, because we have been pounded by you guys as far as reviewing Brit rock, especially the album from an album from a band called Pulp. You may have heard of them. We're gonna do that next, because I've actually never been exposed to Pulp. oh, well, I should listen to them.
Yeah, definitely.
I think that's, we're big on Brit rock. We got to do it. So give us your favorite Brit rock album, and we will make sure that at some point we get to all of them. Leave us a comment, www.velocitiesandmusic.com, youtube.com/velocitiesandmusic. Follow us, Facebook, Twitter. Do it. I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV, moving music critique forward.